Pretend you're dead, my husband whispered, gripping my hand. If they see we're alive, they'll finish us. I was lying on cold rock, covered in blood, unable to feel my legs. And then I heard my son's voice. I think they're not breathing anymore. Finally. In that moment, I realized. My son had just tried to kill us. And if I opened my eyes, it would be over. I'm glad you're here. Please support this story. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your city below. Your support truly matters. That morning felt perfect. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, soft and pale, the kind that makes dust look gentle instead of dirty. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the familiar rhythm of Frank folding the newspaper at the table. Coffee steamed between us. The smell was rich and grounding, the same blend we had bought for years. I remember thinking how comforting it was that some things never changed. I stood at the counter making toast. One slice jumped too high and landed on the floor. I laughed and bent down to pick it up, brushing crumbs from my fingers like it didn't matter. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt wrong. Frank glanced up from the paper and smiled at me over his glasses. That smile, steady, calm, earned over decades, made me feel safe in a way I rarely noticed anymore. 8 o'clock, he said. They'll be here soon. Ethan and Lauren. Our son had called a week earlier, his voice lighter than it had been in years. He sounded almost excited. Let's go to the mountains, he'd said. Just the 4 of us. A family trip. No stress. I remembered hanging up the phone and standing still in the hallway, holding it against my chest like something fragile. I'm so happy, I had told Frank later that night. He finally wants to spend time with us. For years, Ethan had been busy. Always busy. His visits had shortened. His calls had become efficient instead of warm. So this invitation felt like a gift, an opening, a return. That morning, when he arrived, he hugged me longer than usual. His arms felt strong. Familiar. He smelled like the same cologne he wore as a young man, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. Lauren smiled brightly and kissed my cheek. She called me Mom in that affectionate tone that always made me want to believe in her sincerity. We drank coffee together. We joked. Ethan teased his father about driving too slowly. Frank laughed and shook his head. I watched them both from the corner of my eye, memorizing the scene without knowing why. The sound of cups on the table. The scrape of a chair leg. The way sunlight caught in Ethan's hair. If there was a warning that morning, I missed it. I believed in the picture in front of me. I believed we were a family. That day, standing in my kitchen with toast in my hand and coffee growing cold beside me, I had no idea that by nightfall, everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and my own child would be shattered beyond repair. The first warning sign appeared the moment we got into the car. Ethan didn't ask who wanted to drive. He simply reached out, took the keys from Frank's hand, and said, "I'll do it." His tone was firm, final, as if the decision had already been made long before we stepped outside. We pulled away from the house just after 8. The morning was bright, almost painfully beautiful. Blue sky stretched endlessly above us, the kind of sky that usually made Frank comment on how lucky we were. This time, he said nothing. Inside the car, the air felt heavier than it should have. There was no music. No radio. No casual noise to soften the silence. Ethan had always filled car rides with sound, old songs, jokes, stories from work. Now there was only the steady hum of the engine and the faint clicking of Lauren's phone. She sat in the front seat, her face lit by the screen. Her fingers moved constantly, tapping messages I couldn't see. She didn't turn around once. Not to smile. Not to ask if we were comfortable. Not to include us in whatever conversation she was having. Frank shifted beside me, adjusting his seatbelt. "So," he said, lightly, forcing cheer into his voice, "which trail are we heading to?" Ethan's jaw tightened. There's one I know, he replied. You'll like it. That was all. The road began to narrow as we left the main highway. Houses thinned out. Trees closed in. Shadows slid across the windshield like long fingers. I watched the signal bars on my phone drop, one by one, until there were none. I glanced at the dashboard clock. We had already been driving longer than I expected. Maybe, I said carefully, choosing my words, we shouldn't stay too late. The weather can change quickly up here. Lauren stopped typing. She turned around slowly and looked directly at me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It's fine, she said. Ethan knows this area. Ethan didn't look at me. Instead, he pressed harder on the gas. The car surged forward, gravel snapping sharply beneath the tires. My stomach tightened. I studied his face through the rearview mirror. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, focused, distant, unreadable. There was no excitement in them. No warmth. Just concentration. The kind you see in someone completing a task. A familiar unease crept into my chest. It was quiet but insistent. The same feeling I had years ago when something wasn't right with Noah, back when he was still alive. The same instinct that never came with words, only certainty. Frank leaned closer to me, his voice barely audible. Margaret, he whispered, do you feel that? I nodded, afraid to speak. The road twisted sharply, pulling us deeper into the mountains. We hadn't seen another car in miles. No hikers. No signs. Only trees, rock, and the steady rhythm of Ethan's breathing as he drove. Lauren's phone buzzed. She checked it, typed quickly, then locked the screen and slipped it into her bag. Almost there, Ethan said. That was the moment I knew. Whatever this trip was meant to be, it had nothing to do with family. And whatever my son had planned, we were already far beyond the point of turning back. When I saw Ethan's eyes in the rearview mirror, my chest tightened. It was not fear yet. Not panic. It was recognition. That look, distant, emptied of warmth, had visited my life once before, years ago, in a moment I had never fully allowed myself to remember. In moments like this, memories do not ask permission. They arrive whole, heavy, unavoidable. I saw my other son. Noah. He had been nothing like Ethan. Where Ethan was careful and ambitious, Noah was open, soft around the edges. He laughed easily. He trusted too quickly. He dreamed in ways that never translated into money or status. He wanted to teach. He wanted to help people. He wanted a small life that felt honest. Frank and I worried about him constantly, the way parents worry when a child doesn't harden the way the world expects. But I loved that about him. I loved that he stayed gentle. The night he died, the phone rang just after midnight. I remember the exact sound of it, sharp, wrong, splitting the silence of our bedroom. Frank answered first. I watched his face change as he listened. The color drained slowly, as if something vital were being pulled out of him. There had been an accident. A fall. A mistake. They said it was sudden. They said there was nothing anyone could have done. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed afterward, holding Noah's old sweatshirt in my hands, breathing in the faint smell of detergent and something that was only him. I remember thinking that if I stayed very still, the world might reverse itself. It did not. After Noah's death, something shifted inside our family. It was subtle at first, almost polite. We stopped saying his name as often. We avoided certain memories. Ethan changed without announcing it. He became sharper. More serious. More focused on success. On control. Lauren entered his life not long after, bright and efficient, with clear opinions about what mattered. She encouraged his ambition. She spoke often about security, about the future, about not making the same mistakes. I told myself this was normal. That grief reshapes people. That losing a brother does something permanent to a man. Still, there were moments, small, quiet ones, when I felt something tighten in my chest. When Ethan's voice sounded rehearsed instead of real. When his concern felt measured. I ignored those moments. A mother always wants to believe. Looking at him now, driving us deeper into the mountains, I felt the echo of that old night press against my ribs. The same helplessness. The same disbelief. I wondered, suddenly, how long I had been choosing not to see. The road curved sharply, and the memory slipped back into its place, but it left something behind. Clarity. Not fear yet. Just understanding. And once understanding arrives, it does not leave quietly. When Ethan married Lauren, everyone told us how fortunate we were. She was the kind of woman people trust on sight. Polite without being warm. Efficient without appearing cold. She brought homemade desserts to family dinners and insisted on washing dishes herself, even when I told her not to bother. She called me Mom early on. Not shyly. Not hesitantly. Confidently, as if claiming a role she had already rehearsed. After Noah's death, the house had felt hollow, like a place that echoed too much. Lauren filled that space easily. She talked about plans. About moving forward. About not getting stuck in grief. I wanted to be grateful. At first, the questions she asked felt harmless. She wanted to know how Frank and I organized our paperwork. Whether everything was simple. Whether our documents were up to date. Clarity is such a gift, she once said, smiling, while helping me sort through old folders in the study. Her fingers lingered on a thick envelope longer than necessary. Another time, she asked about insurance. Life insurance. Health coverage. What would happen if something unexpected ever occurred? Her tone was calm. Practical. Reasonable. I told myself she was just responsible. Thoughtful. Preparing for the future the way young people are taught to. Then came the comments that were easier to ignore than confront. How Frank was still very active for his age. How hiking trails could be dangerous if you weren't careful. How stress could affect older hearts. Always followed by a smile. Always softened with concern. Ethan changed alongside her. He became firmer. More decisive. Less open to discussion. Conversations turned into conclusions. This is better, he'd say. Trust me. That word came up often. Trust. Once, a neighbor mentioned something casually while we stood by the mailbox. I heard Ethan's business hasn't been doing so well, she said. Hope everything's all right. I dismissed it immediately. Laughed it off. My son was careful. Responsible. I had raised him that way. A mother always wants to trust. But after that, I started noticing patterns. Lauren guided conversations the way someone steers a cart, gently, but always toward the same aisle. Money. Property. Planning. She asked about the will again. About whether we'd considered simplifying things so Ethan wouldn't be burdened later. She talked about debt like an abstract problem. About how quickly it could spiral if people weren't proactive. And Ethan listened to her. Driving through the mountains now, all of it arranged itself in my mind with terrible clarity. The questions. The pressure. The timing. This trip. Lauren's calm wasn't reassurance. Ethan's control wasn't confidence. They were preparation. They hadn't brought us here to spend time together. They had brought us here because it was quiet. Because it was remote. Because no one would hear anything. The realization settled into me slowly, not as panic, but as certainty. And certainty is heavier than fear. The mountain air felt wrong before I understood why. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't the height. It was the way the silence pressed inward, as if the world had leaned closer to listen. Every breath scraped my throat. Pine resin, dust, stone, something sharp and metallic. It all mixed together until breathing felt like effort instead of instinct. Wind moved somewhere far below us, but where we stood, the air felt trapped. Lauren stepped forward first. "Come on," she said lightly, already walking. Her boots found the gravel without hesitation, as if she had walked this path before. I noticed immediately that she wasn't heading toward the main trail. The marked path curved gently to the left, wide and familiar, the kind of trail meant for families and photographs. Lauren turned right. The ground there was narrower, less forgiving, slanted. Ethan followed her without a word. Frank stayed close to me. His arm brushed mine, steady, deliberate. "This isn't the trail," he murmured. "I know," I said. Each step sent loose stones clicking into nothing. I didn't look down, but my body felt the drop anyway, the open space pulling at my balance. Trees thinned quickly. Soil gave way to exposed rock. The mountain stopped pretending to be gentle. Lauren stopped near a ledge and turned around, smiling. The smile was bright. Practiced. Too quick. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said. "You can see everything from here." She raised her phone. "Let's take a picture." She gestured closer to the edge. "Stand right there," she said, pointing to a flat slab of stone that looked solid until you noticed the way it tilted, just slightly, toward empty air. Frank stopped. "This is far enough," he said. Ethan stepped behind us. I felt him without turning. His presence changed the space, compressed it. Not touching. Just close. Close enough that I could feel his breath. "Just one step," Ethan said. "You'll see the whole valley." His voice was calm. Measured. Final. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of Lauren's phone. My face looked older than it had that morning. Not afraid. Stripped down. As if something essential had already been taken away. Lauren lowered the phone with a sharp sigh. "Don't make this difficult," she said. The word difficult landed heavier than anger would have. Frank's hand closed around mine. His grip was firm, not desperate. "If anything happens," he whispered, "do not move." I nodded. Ethan inhaled. I heard it. The slow, steady breath of someone who had already decided. Then he pushed. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't chaotic. It was exact. The ground slid away like a thought erased mid-sentence. The sky spun violently. My body struck stone once, twice, hard, sharp impacts that exploded into pain. Air tore out of my lungs. Something inside me broke with a sound that never reached my ears. Then silence swallowed everything. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. Cold against my cheek. Wetness in my hair. A distant ringing that might have been inside my head. I tried to move. Nothing happened. I tried again, sending the command more forcefully. Still nothing. My legs weren't numb. They were absent. Beside me, Frank lay twisted, his body at an angle that made my stomach turn even through the pain. His eyes were closed. His chest moved, shallow and uneven. Relief came, sharp and fleeting. Footsteps crunched above us. Small stones skittered down, bouncing against rock, disappearing into the drop. I closed my eyes. Frank's fingers brushed mine, trembling once before tightening. "Pretend we're dead," he breathed. "If they see we're alive, they'll finish us." I let my body go slack. I slowed my breath until it felt wrong. I let pain exist without reacting to it. Above us, voices drifted down. Lauren's first, high, breathless, almost theatrical. "Oh my God. Ethan, I think." "I know," he said. There was a pause. Long enough for hope to form and die. "I think they're gone," he said quietly. Finally. The words settled into me like a weight. Finally. I lay there, broken against the mountain, blood cooling on my skin, my son standing above me, and time stopped behaving the way it should. Seconds stretched. Thoughts came slowly, deliberately. If I opened my eyes, this would not end here. So I stayed still. I kept my eyes closed and let the mountain decide what I could feel. Pain pulsed through me in waves, hot, then dull, then hot again, until it became its own kind of weather. I concentrated on the smallest things, the texture of rock against my cheek, the stickiness of blood drying at my temple, the way Frank's hands stayed wrapped around mine as if he could anchor me to life by will alone. Above us, their voices drifted closer. Gravel shifted. A small stone bounced once, twice, then disappeared into the drop. Lauren's breath came fast, excited in a way that made my stomach turn. "We should check," she said. "Just to be sure." Ethan answered with a tired impatience that sounded almost familiar, like a son arguing about chores. "They're gone." They hit hard. There was a pause, and then I heard something else, an exhale that wasn't relief. It was release. "All of this," Lauren said, quieter now, "all of this is finally over." Frank's fingers tightened around mine. I wanted to squeeze back, to reassure him, but I didn't dare. I stayed slack. I stayed broken. I stayed dead. Lauren moved closer. Her boots scraped rock. I sensed her shadow pass across the thin light behind my eyelids. "Your mother always looked at me like I was temporary," she said, almost laughing. "Like I was a phase you'd grow out of." Ethan said nothing. "You know what I hate?" Lauren continued. "People like her. People who sit on money like it's a virtue. Like we're supposed to struggle so they can feel superior." Ethan's voice came low. "We didn't have a choice." That was the sentence that turned my blood to ice. Because it wasn't denial. It was justification. I could picture them above us without seeing them, Lauren's phone in her hand, Ethan's shoulders tight, his gaze fixed on the problem in front of him the way it had been fixed on the road. Lauren made a small sound, impatient again. "Just say it." Ethan inhaled. "My firm is finished. The loans, everything is due. If we don't pay, we lose the house. We lose everything. And the will," Lauren added quickly. "Your father's will was useless until they were gone. They wouldn't change it. She wouldn't change it." Ethan spoke as if he were reading a list he had memorized. "We tried. We asked. We pushed. She kept saying later. She kept acting like we had time." Lauren laughed softly. "She had time. We didn't." I felt Frank's hand tremble. His breathing changed, shallow and uneven, and I knew he was fighting to stay quiet. I forced myself to focus. My coat pocket. The small weight of my phone. The morning, how I had slid it there out of habit before leaving the house. I remembered thinking I wouldn't need it. I remembered how wrong that thought had been. Very slowly, using only the smallest movement I could risk, I shifted my wrist just enough to press my thumb against the side button through the fabric. My screen lit inside my pocket, a faint warmth against my hip. If they saw me move, I would die. If I did nothing, we would still die, just later, quietly, with no one knowing why. I held my breath and tapped again, praying for a soundless start. I didn't need a call. I didn't need service. I needed proof. Lauren's voice came closer. "We should get a photo," she said. "For the story. Something simple." They slipped. Tragic. Two old people who shouldn't have been hiking. Ethan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice cracked the tiniest bit, as if a part of him still knew what he was doing. "Just, stop talking." "Oh, don't," Lauren snapped. "Don't pretend you're sad now. You pushed them." Silence. Then Ethan said, very quietly, "I didn't want it like this." "But you did it," Lauren replied. "And now we're free." I let that word settle in my chest. Free. My phone, hidden in my pocket, captured every syllable. I don't know how long we lay there after they left. Time stretched into something shapeless. Pain made minutes meaningless. The sky shifted behind my eyelids, and the wind changed direction. Frank's voice came as a rasp. Margaret, we have to breathe. A little more. A little louder. Someone might hear. I opened my eyes a fraction. The world swam. Rock blurred. Blood blurred. But above the ledge, far away now, there was nothing, no shadow, no movement, no sun. Only sky. We did what we could. Frank made noise when he dared. I let my breath turn into a whisper of a sob, then a little more, then a sound that might carry. When help finally arrived, it didn't come like a miracle. It came like work. A hiker first, shouting, scrambling, terrified. Then more voices. Then radios. Then hands on my shoulders, firm and practiced. A paramedic leaned close. Ma'am, can you hear me? I tried to speak and tasted blood. Frank was lifted first. I heard someone say his name, because his wallet had been found. I heard another voice say, he's alive. Alive. The word felt unreal. In the ambulance, a young nurse rode with us, her face tight with concentration. She kept asking questions. Allergies. Medications. Names. I answered when I could, and when I couldn't, I reached into my pocket with shaking fingers and pressed my phone into her hand. Listen, I whispered. Please. She frowned, confused. Then her eyes moved across the screen as she understood what it was. Her expression changed. Not to pity. To anger. At the hospital, under bright lights and the smell of antiseptic, she leaned over me again and said, very softly, I heard it. Did you? My throat burned. Did you hear who? She nodded. Your son. And her. I closed my eyes. Not from pain this time. From the knowledge that the truth had left my pocket. It was no longer mine to carry alone. And when the police came to my room, the nurse stood beside them, phone in hand, as steady as a witness. The hospital room was too bright, no matter the hour. White walls. White sheets. White light that never softened, even at night. Machines surrounded me, breathing and clicking and reminding me that my body no longer belonged only to me. Every sound felt amplified, as if silence itself had been taken away. Frank lay in the bed beside mine, separated by a thin curtain that did nothing to protect me from the sound of his breathing. Each inhale came with a faint rattle, uneven and fragile. I listened the way I once listened to my children sleeping, counting breaths, holding my own until the next one came. He was alive. That fact refused to settle. When the doctor came, he spoke slowly, carefully, the way people do when they know words can injure as much as comfort. Broken bones. Internal injuries. Surgery already completed. More ahead. Recovery measured in months. He did not say miracle. I was grateful for that. Miracles demand celebration. This demanded endurance. The police returned later, quiet and respectful. They did not raise their voices. They did not rush me. They asked questions already shaped by what they had heard. Did I recognize the voices? Yes. Did I understand what the recording contained? Yes. Was the push intentional? Yes. Saying yes to those questions felt heavier than saying my son's name ever had. Ethan did not come to the hospital. Lauren did not call. I learned through a nurse, and later through an officer, that they had been arrested without spectacle. Taken from their home early in the morning. No shouting. No resistance. Neighbors watching silently from behind curtains. The charge was spoken plainly, attempted murder. The words felt unreal, like a foreign language that still somehow applied to me. When Frank was awake enough to speak, his voice came out raw and uneven. He didn't hesitate, he said. Not even for a second. I reached for his hand. Bruised. Swollen. Still warm. I know, I said. We didn't say Ethan's name again that day. Or the next. Some truths are too sharp to handle repeatedly. Days blurred together. Nurses changed shifts. 4 bags emptied and were replaced. Meals arrived untouched, then disappeared again. Outside the window, the world continued with inappropriate normalcy, cars passing, people laughing, lives unfolding as if nothing had fractured. One afternoon, I found myself watching the parking lot below. A woman helped an older man into a car. A child skipped ahead of her mother. A family loaded groceries. I felt older than I ever had. Not because of pain. Because of clarity. We hadn't just lost a son. We had lost the version of him we had carried inside us for decades, the boy we defended, excused, explained away long after he stopped needing protection. That boy died on the mountain. The man who pushed us was someone else entirely. When Frank was moved to another ward, a nurse asked gently if we had family who could help with arrangements. I said yes. And I did not mean Ethan. That night, alone with the hum of machines and the ache of my injuries, I finally let myself cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let grief move through instead of settling. I cried for Noah. I cried for Ethan. I cried for the woman I had been that morning, standing in her kitchen, making toast, believing love would always be enough. By the time sleep came, the tears had stopped. What remained was not peace. It was resolve. Life did not return all at once. It came back quietly, in fragments small enough to be missed if I hadn't been paying attention. First came the work of healing. The slow, repetitive hours in physical therapy rooms that smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant. Frank learned how to trust his body again, one measured step at a time. I learned how to live inside pain without letting it decide who I was. Our days were structured around limitations. Pill organizers on the kitchen counter. Appointments written in careful ink on a calendar that once held birthdays and holidays. We learned which movements were safe, which were not, and how to ask for help without shame. We did not talk much about the trial. Not because it was unimportant, but because it no longer required our presence to move forward. The truth had been spoken. It would continue on its own, carried by people whose job it was to hold it. What surprised me most was the house. When we finally returned, it felt altered, as if it had aged along with us. Not empty. Not haunted. Quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after something decisive. We rearranged things slowly. Furniture shifted to make room for walkers and wide turns. Rugs were rolled away so no one would trip. Lamps were moved closer to chairs. Windows opened that had stayed shut for years, letting light reach corners we had ignored. One afternoon, while sorting through paperwork, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in decades. Inside were drawings. Crayon suns. Stick figures with oversized smiles. Names written in uncertain, crooked letters. All the children. I sat with them for a long time. I did not cry. Some memories don't ask for grief. They ask for acknowledgement. The grandchildren came to us without ceremony. There were no speeches, no formal decisions announced aloud. Just a need that settled naturally into our lives. Their questions came slowly, cautiously, as if they were afraid of what answers might cost them. We told the truth without cruelty. We said that sometimes adults make choices that break families. That love can exist without safety. That being someone's parent does not always mean being able to protect them. They listened more than they spoke. They slept in what used to be the guest room. Their shoes lined the hallway in uneven pairs. Backpacks leaned against the wall by the door. Laughter returned to the house, not the same sound as before, but something lighter. More careful. Real. We did not try to recreate what had been lost. We built around the absence. Frank read to them in the evenings, his voice still rough, sometimes pausing when breath ran short. I packed lunches, learned school schedules, memorized teacher names, listened to stories that felt small enough to fix. In those routines, something in me loosened. I was no longer waiting. Not for explanations. Not for apologies. Not for reconciliation. We lived forward, because that was the only direction left. Some mornings, I woke before everyone else and sat at the kitchen table with my coffee. I listened to the house wake slowly. Pipes clicking. Floorboards settling. A child turning over in sleep. The life we were living was not the one I once imagined. But it was honest. And honesty, I learned, is its own kind of reward. This story taught me something I wish I had learned earlier. Evil does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it sits at your table. Sometimes it calls you mom. For years, I believed love meant patience. That if I waited long enough, trusted deeply enough, protected fiercely enough, everything would turn out right. I confused love with endurance. I mistook silence for strength. I was wrong. Love is not blind loyalty. Love is not control. Love is not sacrificing your safety to preserve an illusion. Love is protection. Sometimes, the bravest thing a mother can do is stop explaining, stop excusing, and finally see the truth as it is, not as she hopes it to be. We did not survive because we were strong. We survived because we were willing to open our eyes, even when the cost was unbearable. Names and details in this story have been changed. Now I ask you. Would you trust your family without question? Or would you choose to look for the truth, even if it hurt? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this matter to you, stay with this channel. There are more truths waiting to be told.